So my name is Dr. Chris Hepplewhite. I work for the National Water Policy section in the Department of Agriculture and Water Resources. I've got to get used to saying that because it was Department of the Environment until not that long ago. I'm talking about the context of water quality management in Australia and the National Water Quality Management Strategy, which forms the framework for that. Up? Really? Other way. That would be helpful. There we go. So, water quality management. I sat for a very long time trying to think of a word that described water quality management, and the best I could come with that wasn't an expletive was challenging. And the reason for that is many and varied, and essentially that's the problem. It's a very diverse problem. It's all day, every day, constantly changing. Large numbers of stakeholders from a wide variety of groups, urban, rural, and environmental. Diverse issues from pathogens, both environmental and human, but also toxicants, blue-green algae, and more run-of-the-mill things that you occur on a daily basis. And a wide range of quality endpoints, so it's not just one size fits all. It's not about having high water quality for all things. It's about fit for purpose. So how do you achieve water quality that's suitable for one person but different for another? So you need to work on those specific needs of the end users, as well as engaging the levels of engagement. Some people know a lot about it, some people don't know very much. Some people have a lot of resources to look at this, and some people don't. And how do you deal with that? As well as all of the cultural requirements. So in terms of indigenous cultural requirements, but also the cultural requirements of the end user. We talk about water as life. Everything needs it, all industry, all people, all things. But water quality is about health. And I don't just mean human health. We're talking about environmental health, so the aquatic ecology that live in water, the water-dependent ecosystems that depend on that water, such as riparian vegetation and those sorts of things. We're talking about economic health, so productivity, dependent on treatment costs, depending on transport. We've got tourism that depends a lot on water quality, depending on how it changes, as well as the social costs. So social health, which is recreation sites, cultural and spiritual value of that water. So the National Water Quality Management Strategy recognized that its water quality does not obey jurisdictional boundaries, and it can travel across those jurisdictional boundaries, and so a national approach was required. So the Australian government, and in collaboration and cooperation with the states and territories, have developed this high-level strategy which allows you to set objectives, so in this case the protection of the environment, while still sustaining economic and social development, recognizing that there's multiple benefits to all of the end users, but significant cost in developing the bits of the strategy that are required. So the process is about using a risk management framework, develop a set of national guidance that is developed once and used many times by all of the different states and territories. The first documents were released in 1994, and they're constantly being updated, and I'll talk a little bit more about some of the key documents that are being revised at the moment. So it's a national framework with jurisdictional implementation. By that I mean, under the Australian Constitution, the states and the territories are responsible for water quality and water quantity management. But the Commonwealth supports the National Water Management Strategy, which provides the overarching framework under which that regulation can occur. So it's a really great model of federalism, where through collaborative effort, you achieve a specific outcome at minimum cost. Develop the documentation once, and it's used many times. So the National Water Quality Management Strategy has three key components: the policy, process, and guidelines. The main policy objective is about maintaining sustainable water quality for environmental protection while maintaining economic and social development within Australia from those water resources. The process part is about the processes which the states and territories work with their communities to develop water quality objectives. So what water quality do they want to achieve the community values or the values the community holds for that water resource, and then developing those management plans. So again, the strategy has documentation about how you go through those processes and to assist the states and territories and the communities who are doing that work with those developments. And then there's the guidelines, and the guidelines are the technical, best quality scientific advice to help assist the communities and the governments in the development of those objectives, and to set standards for which the regulations can be based. So the guidelines are that authoritative guide for setting the water quality objectives. It's the numbers. But they're a nationally consistent set of numbers that all of the states and territories can use as they see fit. So they're not mandatory, they are not regulation. So they can be tailored for the individual communities or situations that are encountered within the jurisdictional regulation environment. Currently there are approximately 26, and we're trying to rationalize that down to a smaller number to address the higher risk, nationally specific problems. And again, I'll talk about the key guidelines in the next slide. So there are three key main sets of guidelines. The Australian and New Zealand Guideline for Fresh and Marine Water Quality, or sometimes referred to as the ANZAC, or the Australian and New Zealand Environmental Conservation Council 2000 guidelines, all a bit of a mouthful, which are about the protection of aquatic ecology. So essentially about water-dependent ecosystems dependent on those water resources and the ambient water quality that is in them. The Australian Drinking Water Guidelines, which is about the protection of drinking water quality and drinking water quality in all its guises except for bottled water. So bottled water sits under the food standard, and it's a very different thing. And we could talk a lot about that, but I won't. And then last but not least is the Australian Guidelines for Water Recycling, which is actually 4 documents. So managing health and environmental risk, which is the human health, the application of recycled water in irrigation, for example, and then the augmentation of drinking water supplies, so as it sounds, adding potable reuse water to potable supplies, stormwater harvesting, and the last one is the managed aquifer recharge. I will say that both the Australian and New Zealand guidelines for water, fresh and marine water quality, and the managing health environmental risks in recycling are both under revision currently, and both due for publication mid-next year. As part of that review, we've also reviewing the National Water Quality and Management Strategy itself, and there'll be a new waterquality.gov.au web presence next year that both the Water Quality Management Strategy and the guideline documents that sit underneath it will be published on their own as a separate entity. So in summary, the approach that Australia has used is about a country-specific, risk-based national framework for water quality management. The National Water Quality Management Strategy consists of those three key components: policy, process, and guidelines. The overall objective is to maintain and improve water quality while maintaining economic and social development across the country. The guidelines provide the nationally relevant technical advice at least possible cost. So everybody contributes a small amount rather than developing them all themselves individually. And we have those guidelines that are freely available on the website. A new website will be developed next year. So thank you very much. If you have any questions, I'm just over there on the stand, and you can come and talk to me anytime. Thanks very much.